Okay, this is session number 09-0001. The date is November 7th, 2009. We're interviewing Anna Maxie, and I represent Taylor South and Danielle Wilson. To start us off, where were you born?
Pueblo, Colorado,
When was that?
December 6, 1932.
Have you lived here all your life?
Yes, I traveled with my husband in the service for several years, but I was born, raised here, and I probably will die here.
Who are your parents?
My parents were Rose Zito and Tony Zito.
Were they born here?
Yes. My dad was born in Denver, my mom was born in Pueblo.
Okay. What did they do for a living?
Well, my mom was a housewife back in those days, and in the years the women didn't work. And my dad was worked at the Rainbow Bakery.
How did they die?
They both had heart attacks. I don't even remember the year that they both died right now. Let me try to think. My dad passed away first, and I think he died in 59. And my mom, my mom was born in 1900 and she died at 91, so she died in 1991.
Did they ever talk to you about the education life back then?
Well, not really. They wanted me to go to high school and college, but I didn't go. I graduated second in my class, but I didn't go to college because I had already been offered a good job. And I took that job and worked at it, and then in the meantime got married, and then moved to Germany.
Okay. Did you meet your husband here?
Mm-hmm. Yes, in Pueblo.
And what was his name?
Charles L. Maxie.
Okay.
We met on New Year's Eve of 1956.
Nice. You guys met at a bar or something?
No, we met at a drive-in on West 4th Street. We were having, my girlfriend and I had gone out and we were just going to go get a hamburger and a Coke, and he and his boyfriend were driving around and happened to stop at the same place and pulled in behind us, and they got out of their car and came over and introduced themselves to us, and from then on, we all went together. My friend that went with my husband's buddy, she married him, and I married my husband.
Cool.
And that was kind of a storybook-like thing.
What did he do?
Who?
Your husband?
Well, he as soon as he graduated from high school, he went right into the Army. That's all he did.
He got drafted into the
No,
Army?
he enlisted.
He enlisted?
Mm-hmm.
Where all did you live again?
Well, we lived, when we first got married, I was working at the National Broom Factory, and I had a really good job, and he had only been in the Army a couple of years and didn't have a lot of rank, so he wasn't making too much. So I stayed here for about 6 months and continued with my job. And I had bought a car that wasn't quite paid off, and I wanted to get it paid off, so I worked until I paid off my car. Well, then I sold my car and got a nice amount for it, and then I had to put in passport papers and everything at the time to go over to Germany to be with him because he was stationed there. So I got my passport and went over there, and we spent 3 years there. And then from that time on, he made enough rank. He had been made a sergeant and a staff sergeant that I didn't need passports. Wherever he went, if it wasn't a war zone, I could go anywhere with him. So from here to Germany, we stayed there 3 years, and then we got orders for Fort Knox, Kentucky. And we went to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and we stayed there till 61, and my son was born there. My oldest daughter was born in Germany in 59, and my son was born in Fort Knox, Kentucky in 61. And then from Kentucky, we got orders for Fairbanks, Alaska, and we moved to Alaska, and we lived there for 3 years, and in Fairbanks. And then we came back home, and we went back to Fort Riley, Kansas. And then from Fort Riley, Kansas, he got his notice for Vietnam. He was in school at the time for more schooling, and he was going to get another higher rank, but he got notice to go to Vietnam, and he left for Vietnam in October of '65. I may have some of these dates wrong, let's see.
That's okay.
No, let's see, now, wait just a minute, let me think. Because he only had 1 month left in Vietnam when he got killed. And he got killed in February. So he was, I think he left about January of the year before. And he died February 23rd, 1966.
To go back, when you say you lived in Germany,
Mhm.
did you guys travel together over there, or was he there before you went?
He was there, and then I flew over. And he was stationed at Bad Kissingen, Germany. It was a resort town. It's where President Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, used to go there because they had this clinic for people who had polio. And you know, he was a cripple. He was in a wheelchair, President Roosevelt was. So he went there every year. And that was the only city in Germany that the United States never bombed during World War II, because it was off limits, because our president went there to, you know, get better from his polio. So then from there, we got orders for Fort Knox, Kentucky. And we stayed there for a little over a year, but almost a year and a half. And then from there, we went to Fort Wainwright, Alaska. And we were there, let's see, we left there in 1963. And we came back to the States, and we went to Fort Riley, Kansas, and we were stationed there till September of '66. And then he got orders for Vietnam, so I could not go. So I took my 2 children, I had 2 children in the meantime, and we moved back to Pueblo, and he went to Vietnam. And he got killed August 19th, 1966. He had 1 month left before he was due to come home when he got killed. So then I've stayed in Pueblo ever since. I got jobs and worked and supported my family, bought a couple of houses, and worked all my life, and went to work at St. Mary Corwin Hospital, and I retired from there in 1984 with 18 years of service there, and I've just been retired ever since. Now live at Don Quixote Apartments at 2027 Acero, number 47.
Nice. Out of all those places that you lived in,
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember anything traumatic or a world event or anything that happened in those countries that you remember?
Well, when we were stationed in Germany, we were stationed in a border town, is what they called, which separated East and West Germany. And there was this patch of ground that was probably like 5 to 6 blocks long that separated the East from the West. Now the East Germans were still communistic. The West Germans weren't. So my husband was in border patrol, and they patrolled that border. That was their job to do. So at first we couldn't get government quarters because there weren't any available. So when I got there, we lived in what they call on the economy. And we lived in a little one-bedroom apartment, just a real small place. And in German money, we were paying $460 a month. But in American money, that was only $90 a month. So we lived there until government quarters became available for us. Well, in the meantime, my husband got a rank as sergeant. So then we were allowed to move into government quarters. So we moved into government quarters and we lived there in government quarters, and then we came home in 61 and visited for a while, and from here we went to Alaska, and we lived there until 64, and then in 64 we came back and went to Fort Riley, Kansas, which to me was my favorite place to be. We had brand new quarters at the time. No one else had ever lived in them, and made a lot of friends, and I got a job and worked a little bit part-time while I was there. And then my husband got orders for Vietnam about 45 days before, he was to leave. So he left in late August or early September of 65, and he was due to come home in 66, in that time, and he was killed 19 days before he came home. He died August 19th, 1966. Anything else you want to know that I can help you with?
Was there anything in Kentucky or Alaska or anywhere else that you lived that was pretty memorable?
Well, yes, because see, we lived in just out of Fort Knox, and that's where all the gold of the United States is stationed. So therefore, they took, when we were stationed there, they would go and guard so many days out of the month, and then another group would go, and that was our main, that was his main job while we were there. And we lived in a little mobile home park halfway between Fort Knox, Kentucky and Louisville, Kentucky. So he would go on post each day, and we lived in a small mobile home, and I had the one little child at the time, and we lived there. And then from there, like I say, we went to, we've been to Germany. It's been so many years ago, it's hard to remember. Went to Germany, came home, went to Kentucky, went to Alaska then. And we went to Alaska in 61. And came back in 64, and went to Fort Riley, Kansas from 64 to 65, and then he left in 65 to go to Vietnam, and I came home, and that's the story. I've been here ever since. He was killed in August 19th, 1966.
How many children do you have?
I have 3. We have 3 along the way.
And their names are?
Well, Luann was born in Germany, July 4th. Of 59, because she's 50 years old now. She's my oldest child. And then my son, Charles, was born in Louisville, Kentucky at Ireland Army Hospital, and he's 47 years old. He was born in 61. And then my youngest daughter, whose name is Gail, was born here in Pueblo. And when my husband got orders for Vietnam, I was pregnant with her, and he left for Vietnam, but he never got to see her because he was killed before he got to come home, so therefore she never got to see her dad.
Do you think she has been maybe traumatized about never being able to
It
see?
is, yeah, I think it has. Well, and we all spoiled her because she never got to see her dad, and she really worried about that. So, but she's a very, very intelligent young lady, has a very good job, lives in Bordentown, New Jersey, and is a title specialist at Allstate's Title Company, and she has two beautiful boys, and she has a very lovely husband.
And when you were traveling around the world, did you ever think about hurting your family by leaving them, or did you
Oh,
go
no.
with your husband?
Wherever he went, I went right with him.
Yeah.
I've been through, border patrol where you didn't know if they were really going to come and shoot you or not, and I figured if it was good enough for him, it was good enough for me. And my daughter was born in Germany in a German hospital, and believe me, that's not a pleasant place to go to a hospital in. They were very primitive back then, but we made it through, and then came on home and went to Kentucky, and from there we went to Alaska, and then from there we came back here, and our best location that I thought we went and had the nicest place and the nicest time and made a lot of friends was in Fort Riley, Kansas. And we lived in a new housing area, and when he got shipped over, the whole 1st Division went, and that was several thousand men that went at that time. And probably half of them didn't come back.
To go back,
Mm-hmm.
you said your husband enlisted in the Army.
Mm-hmm.
What was he ranked as again?
He was just a buck private, just a private, as low as you could get.
Was there a certain division that he was in?
Yeah, he was in when he got killed, he was in the 1st Division. They called it the Big Red One. That was the biggest fighting division they had. And he volunteered to go, and do this. And I really didn't want him to go. And he said, it's my life and my job, and I feel like I owe it to the country to go. And he was killed trying to save another man when he was in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore he got quite a few medals and the Purple Heart. And he was a hero. They had, when he died, they closed the Pueblo Army Depot and had a big dinner, and generals from all over the United States came, and at that time General Westmoreland was head of the whole army, and he wrote me a letter and kept in touch with me and called me several times to see if everything was all right. And I was treated very well by the Army. Took care of my family and my children and everything.
Back then, it's been a while. If you can't remember, it's okay, but when you were traveling through Germany and all the places that you've been to, do you remember any of the prices of like grocery food or gas?
Yeah, well, when we were in Germany, it was a prime time to go there because the American dollar was really worth a lot of money then. So for every American dollar, we had almost $5 of German money. And so therefore, my husband made actually at that particular time, because the Army wasn't paying very much back then, he was making between $90 and $100 a month. But actually, that was, in German money, that was like $500 a month. And that was in let's see, we got married in 57, so this was 58, that was 51 years ago. So that was a lot of money back then,
Mm-hmm.
So we bought a German car while we were there. It was called a Ford Taunus, and got a brand new car, and in German money, it cost us like $6,000, but in American money, it was only $1,200. So we drove that, we stayed there for our 3 years, and then we got orders to come back to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and we shipped our car home, and then we couldn't get government quarters because there weren't any available, so we bought a mobile home in Kentucky, and we lived there, let's see, until 60, I believe it was. And then that's when we got orders to go to Alaska. and it was 61. We went to Alaska, and we came home from Alaska in 64, and then we lived in Kentucky from 64 until he got orders for Vietnam, and then he never did get to come home from Vietnam. He was killed there.
So, you took your car from Germany, right?
They came by
shipped it?
by boat. They shipped it on a boat about 2 weeks before we left, because it took a long time to get it, here. So when we got into, when we docked in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, then we went there and picked up our car.
Well, do you remember what kind of car it was?
It was a Ford Taunus. It was
Oh.
green and white. In fact, I have pictures of it. Very nice little car. And we drove that here for a while. And then, well, we bought cars, and everywhere we went, we had to have a car, because my husband was in the part of the Army that went on maneuvers a lot. Well, I had to have a car at home, you know what I mean. So every place that we were, from Germany to Kentucky, to Alaska, to Kansas, we always, had government quarters and cars. And when both of my children, my first 2 children were born, Luann was born in Germany, and Chuck was born in Kentucky at Ireland Army Hospital, and my youngest daughter was born at St. Mary Corwin Hospital because her father was in Vietnam at the time, and he never got to see her.
To go back, you graduated high school. In what year?
1951,
Okay. What school did you attend?
Centennial.
When you were going to high school at that time, did you have a job?
I tutored 2 children whose families were very wealthy, and the children were not doing good one was in grade school, one was in junior high, so I was a senior at Centennial, and my teachers got me jobs because I was in National Honor Society, and I, was pretty, well, second in my class. So I worked and kind of put my way through high school, and then after high school, I got a job at the broom factory, but I wanted some college education, so I also went on and went out to Pueblo Junior College and took shorthand, extra shorthand and typing and bookkeeping, and I became a bookkeeper and all at the broom factory and had a good job there. And then I got married and of course quit my job, and that was the end of my work.
Well, growing up through high school, it was back in the 50s, right? Years before that, do you remember anything about World War I or?
No, World War I wasn't born.
Okay.
That was in the 20s. World War II, my brother was in the Navy, and it was quite traumatic to give him up, but he made it back home okay. And I've lived in Pueblo all my life, except when I traveled with my husband, and we lived in, like I say, we lived in Germany, we lived in Kentucky, we lived in Kansas, and we lived in Alaska in the years that he was in the Army. And I have to say that the Army has been very, very good. When he was killed, they just sent a major here to be at my beck and call for everything, and they took care of all of the funeral and buried my husband at no cost. And actually, when I die, it'll be the same way. They'll bury me at no cost because they've already bought my headstone and everything right next to my husband out at Roselawn. And then they give me a retirement from the Army. I get a VA compensation. And in the meantime, I went to work at St. Mary Corwin Hospital. I worked at the bowling alley in Pueblo for a while. And then I quit there, and I went to work at St. Mary Corwin Hospital and retired from there. And I have a retirement from St. Mary Corwin, as well as my VA, and now I'm old enough to have Social Security, so I'm quite contented. I have a very nice apartment complex and lived in a very nice home, which I sold to another serviceman and his wife, and they still live there.
Well, I think that'll conclude our interview. And
All
thank
right.
you very much for your time.
You're very welcome, my
And
dear.
on behalf of Pueblo West High School and CSU Pueblo and the El Pueblo Museum, thank you.
Thank you for doing this. I think it's gotten my brain to moving a little faster because, you know, over the years, when you've traveled as much as I have, you have to remember. And when you get to be 77, you don't remember as fast as you used to.
Yep.